TE1010 MIDI Controller mode. In MIDI Controller mode there are three menu items. One to send the MIDI information to another machine or a computer, and two to edit two lots of parameters. So let's have a look at MIDI Controller mode. So press the mode button and select from the menu MIDI Controller. There's not a lot to show because once the pedal's been programmed, it's just a matter of using it to press buttons to send MIDI messages. So at the moment, I've just got a few set up. If I press this foot pedal, you can see there's a MIDI message being sent. It's written in hexadecimal, but it's 0646410 and 0646410. Now the way it works is that for each pedal you can have more than one message, and the messages can be either a note, a CC, control change, or a program change, a PC. So the 0 that you can see there at the start of the message is indicating that this is actually a CC message. If I press this other foot pedal, you can see different messages being sent. So it's just telling you what messages are being sent so you can keep an eye on it if something goes wrong. Also, here you can see 127, 127. That's for the expression pedals. I'll just move this across. And if I move this expression pedal, you can see the value is being changed from 0 to 127. And there's also a line that moves across there to help indicate that something's changing. That's that pedal, and the other one's the same. So they're sending CC messages between 0 and 127. However, you can change the limits of that you could make it go from say 50 to 100 if you didn't want to go from 0 to 127. So it's flexible like that. The whole system has 10 banks. So I can press this to go through the banks, pick a bank. And there are 8 pedals because of course I've used 2 of the ones that would be normally with an FCB1010 for mode and enter. So I don't have those available, so that's a bit of a limitation compared to how it was originally programmed. But in this new version, instead of being limited to a certain number of messages per foot pedal, you can actually have up to 120 if you wanted to on one pedal. I don't think anybody would want to do that. So there's 120 messages that can be sent over the 10 banks, over the 8 pedals. And you can put them wherever you want. So you could have 10 messages from one pedal. So this one here could have 10 messages and this one might have none. So long as you don't go over 120. So that's the sending part. Now let's look at the editing. So I press the mode pedal here so I can go to the menu. So what's being shown now is MIDI edit message. So if I select that one, you can see that basically on the screen there's a bunch of numbers in the white which are the current setting for a particular message, and up here there's a couple of numbers here that are also for that particular message. The top one says B for bank, the one underneath it says F for foot pedal, and the message that's being sent has got a channel, a CC, a data, and another data. So at the moment it's sending on channel 10 a CC message with the numbers 90 and the data that goes with that CC message of 127. But if I wanted to change that, all I need to do is change the knobs here, and you can see underneath it's now changed to PC and a different number. So I've changed all the numbers. If I want to change these things up here, I can change the bank, and the bank's now changed. The black numbers on the white background are the current values for this particular message, and the white numbers on the black background are the ones that it could change to. If I press foot switch 4, if I accept this change, it will now be bank 2, foot switch 2, and 14p program change, channel 14 program change, 117.88. So I can accept that. So that's been written into the EEPROM on the Teensy, and it's saved now. So that's all you do, you just keep going through. Now if I press these buttons I can go to a different message, and you can see the white box with the black writing. The messages are changing to the current message that's in that message slot. So there are 120 of these message slots, and I can make them whatever I want. They can be any bank, any foot switch, and any of the 3 message types: program change, CC, or a note. So that's for the buttons. Let's have a look at the expression pedals. So if I press mode and move down to this one here, which it says MIDI edit expression pedal, and select that one, you can see it's a similar thing. I've got the bank, the foot switch, the channel, the CC. Now, and this time, instead of data, we've got the minimum and maximum values that you want to allow when you sweep the pedal. So if I sweep this pedal here and I don't want it to go down to 1 or to 0, and I want it to go, say, from 50 to 100, I just change the numbers here, and then it'll only go from 50 to 100 rather than 0 to 127 like it can at the moment. So you can see if I do this, if I change these, I'm telling it that when I save this, I want it to go from 0 to 127. So save. So that's now been saved to the memory on the EEPROM. So that's basically it. Now let's look at the code. If I go down from the top, I can find the section that has the data for the MIDI controller mode. So I'll just go down and find it. Menus. Oop. Here we go. MIDI controller. So basically I've got some structures that I'm using to hold the data in. This is the structure for a MIDI message. So a MIDI message can be any type of 3. It's a message type. In here will be stored 0, 1 or 2 depending on the message, CC, PC or note. Each message has a bank that it's assigned to, a foot pedal it's assigned to, a channel it's sending on, the message type, as I said before, and 2 lots of data. This one here says CC type or note, and so if it's a CC, it'll have the CC type, and then the CC data will be here. If it's a note, it'll be the note here, and then the velocity here. If it's a PC message, this one here, then it'll be using this data here for a PC message, program change. There's also a structure being used for the expression pedals. This is similar. It has a bank that it's assigned to, a foot pedal, a channel, what's the CC number, and the values that it can go from minimum to maximum values on the expression pedal. So in memory and on the EEPROM for permanent storage, we're storing the MIDI messages, of which there's 120, and also the expression pedal messages, of which there's 20. Considering that there's 10 banks with 8 pedals in each bank, that's enough for at least 1 for each pedal, 2 for a couple, and you can have as many as you like really, but there's 120 to spread around. And so there's 20 expression pedal messages that can be spread around as well. Okay, these 2 pieces of data here are just for checking to see what the new values are going to be before it's saved in the editing section. These indexes here are to keep track of which position we are in these 2 arrays. And there's also the current value being stored for the expression pedal 2 and expression pedal 1. This is to keep track of which MIDI bank we're on out of the 10. To display a MIDI message, I've also got a structure here which has got the message type, the CC note, the MIDI data and the channel, and there's 10 of those that can be displayed. Alright, so in the setup you'll notice there's a new function here called load controller messages, and the idea of that is to load in from the EEPROM all the messages into the RAM so that they can be accessed. So in the loop here there are no changes because the changes are within these 2 functions, one for the interface and one for the function. So let's go down here and see what's going on. So in the interface mode, depending on what pedal mode we're in, as usual, if I come down here, you can see that there's now, at the bottom of this switch statement, there's a MIDI controller mode, which is when we're actually using it as a MIDI controller. And underneath that there are functions for editing the MIDI messages from the foot switches
messages from the expression pedals. If I go back up to here, you can see if I'm in MIDI controller mode, we're going to choose which MIDI bank we're in, we're going to show the mode, send a message if a pedal's pressed, and in this section we're going to check the expression pedal, see where it is, and send a message based on what value it's currently at, and then show a screen that's illustrating what's going on. In the edit modes, they're fairly similar. It's going to show what mode it is, show the screen for this particular pedal mode. These three functions here are checking to see if buttons are pressed or potentiometers are moved or turned, and seeing what the new values are and updating the values on screen. And this function here will then save the changes if that's what we want to do. For the expression pedals, it's basically very similar, so I won't go through that one. So let's go down here and see what's in here. So this is the show MIDI controller, and it's just as similar to before. It's just showing things on screen based on the data, which I went through before, so I won't go through all that. And it's similar to other things that I've done before. Send expression pedal message. We're checking the potentiometers, making sure they're within range, and then going through all the messages, the 20 messages, and seeing which ones are appropriate for this particular bank and pedal, and sending them. So you can see MIDI send control change based on the CC, the value, and the channel. So MIDI control change, send MIDI control change as part of the MIDI package or the MIDI object. Okay. So this is the function that sends a message depending on what pedal's being pressed. So first of all, I'm initializing what's being shown on the screen so that we can clear it basically. So this is the data that goes on the screen. Only 10 messages can be sent, so I'm only storing 10 of these. That's because of the amount of space that's on the screen that can't fit more than 10. So in this loop here, we're just going through all the potential messages, making sure whether they match the particular foot pedal and the bank that we're currently in, and if they are, if it's a CC message, which is case 0, as I said before, send a control change message. If it's a PC message, which is 1 for that particular parameter, this parameter here, current message type, so it's the message type that's being stored. If it's 1, send a program change, and if it's a note, send a note on. Okay. In this one here, send message is just basically a function to see if the foot pedal's been pressed, and if it does, we send the message for that pedal. So this function here is to change the current MIDI bank by looking to see if a switch has been pressed and changing the value and making sure it doesn't go out of bounds. Alright, so then here's the code for editing messages. This code saves changes to expression pedal data for the MIDI editing. So this part here is actually taking the new values that we've been choosing on the screen and assigning them to the current array so that it can then be saved. And this section here is writing the data to the EEPROM. This was just so I could check it to see if it was working properly by reading back from the EEPROM. This is the function that checks the potentiometers for the expression pedal editing and reads the values, and it stores them in the new expression pedal channel CC type minimum value and maximum value, so that they can be shown on the screen and then updated in EEPROM memory. One of the things you'll notice is a lot of these functions now have got flash mem in front of them. What that does is it saves RAM, because I was running out of RAM when I was trying to compile the program, and I got an error and it wouldn't compile. So by using flash mem, these functions are being read from flash memory and not being loaded into RAM 1 and using up that RAM. So by doing this, I'm actually saving RAM for more vital functions. These functions will run slower, but because this is an editing section of the code, I found that it doesn't make any difference. I can't actually see any change in the speed of the code, and it's not affecting the running of the program. And in other words, it's not time critical, so this particular function isn't time critical, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't load into the fastest RAM that's available. This function here is so you can choose which of the two expression pedals is being targeted by the current message. and foot pedals 1 and 2 are being checked to see if it's going to be 1 or 2 for the expression pedals. Again, here's choosing the MIDI bank for the expression pedals rather than the previous foot pedals. And this one here is to show the MIDI controller pedal screen, which is just full of stuff that you've seen before, so I won't go over all that. This is the function for showing the MIDI controller edit screen for the MIDI messages using the pedals. If I look at that, the one thing you'll notice in here is that because I've made case 0 CC, case 1 PC and case 2 a note, they're the 3 different types of MIDI messages and how they're being stored as 0, 1 and 2. Okay, so that's basically it, and thanks for watching.